Um, why don't we start by showing the book? Do you have a copy of it there?
I do, but as luck would have it,
It's,
there we go.
yep, hold it up a little higher. There it is. Emery Walker, Arts, Crafts, and a World in Motion.
Yeah,
Designed by the author.
that's right.
And why don't we start right in with the design, because I found that although it went through some variations as you were sending drafts of the book.
Yes.
I could see it develop, and I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that process, because the color coding of things makes it easy to know what you're looking at and sort of keep track of things as you go through. There are so many different parts to this.
Yes. Yeah. I think the first thing I thought about with the design was to try and honor, if you like, his ideas whenever I thought of them. And that was one thing, was not to have any running heads, because he didn't like them. So,
Yes.
I don't know if he just felt it didn't, it destroyed the unity of the page. I'm not sure I agree really, but I thought it'd be quite a nice idea not to have any running heads. And originally we did have ones at the side, but we got rid of those. I think we agreed there wasn't much point really, but that would have been, because he would allow sort of shoulder notes, or
Yes, right.
he only liked them at the side if you're going to have them, but he didn't like.
But in this case, even within a chapter, things changed so much
Sure.
that the heads really didn't seem to make sense when.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And so I suppose then I thought, as I was trying to do something that was, I think in some ways it can be if you like, it can be a non-linear read. I mean, you can just jump in if you want. You can.
Absolutely. And
you can either start from the beginning and work your way through, or you can just dip and jump about. So I guess it was trying to, find a sort of clarity like that, and also because his life did seem so diverse, really, in its the various things that he connected with. I thought it would help to organise it a little bit if I tried to break it down into a time period, up to say the end of death of William Morris, and then Walker by himself with Coleman Sanderson up to World War One, and then the sort of World War One experience in which he carries on working, and then his sort of later years, and then a little bit just after he died. Really, it's almost like a tale piece where you can feel. Well, it sort of ends quite symbolic in a way, where there's a letter from his daughter Dorothy talking about the sale of the books that May Morris, who was left at Kelmscott Manor. She'd died the year before. This was 1939, and May had died at the end of 1938, and they were selling off the books. And Dorothy then mentions, it sounds like war's coming. Things are going to become horrid. And it seemed a good sort of elegiac sort of, that's the end really of that world finally of the arts and crafts of the late 90s.
Very much the end of an age.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Although Morris has proved that wrong, because the designs are still with us, and Morris and Co. still flourishes. But yeah, spiritually, it must have seemed like the end of something very definitely that had been sort of lingering on, really. So
I think certainly their influence, or Walker's influence, has carried forward, and I think at one point you mentioned the London Underground type,
yes,
designed by Edward Johnston. That's still you still see that in London.
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
And I'm sure his influence is seen elsewhere. Are there other things you can point to that where we see Walker's influence today?
Yes, I mean, as you say, I mean, Johnston was somebody that Walker very much encouraged when he was in his sort of early years, really, as a calligrapher, and in London that's still all around us. I think it was quite interesting when I gave a a couple of talks on Walker towards the end of last year, and in the US and St. Bride's in London, and I was thinking, is there actually evidence of him around me at home? And I had a look at my bookshelves, and I pulled down a few, which I made into slides, and it shows that sort of the Walker's sort of his pursuit of this sort of the very evenly set page of type, and how you can pull examples out and see where that didn't happen before. And a big thing is this sort of gap, the large spaces they would leave between the end of one sentence and the beginning of another one, so they could justify lines easier.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of sort of word spacing and things as well. You'd say he would have looked at that and said, and so that was one way just immediately in my house I could find where he'd had an influence, I think. But I think which I also said in the talks, I felt that his and Morris's sort of vision of this sort of very sort of typeset pages, it kind of carried through really, and probably reached a peak in the 70s, 80s, especially with sort of Herb Lubalin and ITC. From America in the 60s and 70s, where Lubalin very much took advantage of the fact you had photo settings, so you could do minus line spacing, so he could very much tightly set everything. And I thought that was in a way almost a logical conclusion of probably what both Morris and Walker had been advocating. And I suppose you could argue as well that really with the Doves Press books, that the Morris with the Kelmscott Press book was very backward looking. The Doves, it's interesting how they completely went in absolutely a polar opposite and kind of stripped everything down and kept it sort of,
while still honoring
yes,
the
yes,
past, particularly with Jensen and Dove's type.
yes. But you could say that in a way they were looking forward much more to the way book design would go in the 20th century than
than trying to recreate something from the past.
Yes, yeah. It could have been partly driven as well by the sheer sort of labour intensity of Kelmscott Press books as well, I think, which must have been a factor where you think, actually, is there another way we can do this while still keeping the spirit of it?
But Kelmscott Press books, beautiful as they are not especially readable.
No, they're not.
I think one of Walker's goals was readability.
Yes, sure, yes, yeah. I do feel the Kelmscott books, I can see why people love them, but equally I can see why people, if they do, why people don't like them as well. There's, you can see a strong, you can see strong arguments on both sides, but the fact that they are significant in what they inspired, I think is beyond now already.
Well, you mentioned his Walker's 1888 lecture that spurred Morris to start the Kelmscott Press. What was the impact of that lecture? Beyond, it wasn't just Morris. Oscar Wilde reviewed it. It just had a huge. This little lecture had this huge impact.
Yeah, I think Charles Ricketts was there, who then started the Vale Press as well. He was inspired by it. So, yeah, he seems to have really set something rolling. I think the idea was had been lurking in Morris's mind for quite a while, and he had an interest in book design already, and there seems to be evidence. He used the Chiswick Press for his some of his earlier books of poems, which were just sort of down the road from him, really, where he lived in London. And so I think Walker, rather than the idea then coming into Morris's head from the lecture, I think it kind of inflamed it, really. Suddenly thought, I can do this, and probably I've got the man here who can help me do it, which he did. But yes, it does seem to be one of those. The history of type sort of seems to have these sort of golden evenings, as I sort of call them, where it seems like something magical happens. There's one where Edward Johnson, after one of his classes at London, the Central School, I think he's walking back with Eric Gill and somebody else. I think it's Noel Rook, and they supposedly see this I think it's just like a commercial wagon that has a sans serif lettering painted on it, and they're suddenly sort of, that's the kind of lettering we should have. You know, so there are these stories like that, whether they sort of happen or not. But certainly the Walker lecture one, you know, we know it did happen. It does seem to have had this great effect, really. I suppose of people just seeing these letter forms so large as well, sort of projected. You know, it must have been quite striking at the time, I would think.
And I saw that in Oscar Wilde's review, he at the very end he notes that the next lecture is going to be on bookbinding by Coleman Sanderson.
That's right. Yes.
and of course then they got together years later and had throughout the book that relationship eased in and out. Ending in disaster.
Yes.
It's a fascinating story that goes through the book.
Yes. Well, yeah. What happened there really? Because they sort of claim to be great friends, and you think they would have known each other's personalities well enough to have understood probably how the relationship would work, but
which it did for
which it did, yes, yeah. I mean, Coleman Sanderson seems to have lost patience by about 1902. He writes this letter that he supposedly never sent, but where he's sort of asking what Walker's contribution. Could he please tell him exactly what his contribution is? Because he feels he's doing everything. But then he supposedly doesn't send it, and so, as you say, it does carry on. Yeah, it's interesting. I think. I mean, Coleman Sanderson does, from sort of recorded history, Coleman Sanderson does most of the talking, but Walker seems to have this very steely pursuit, almost of revenge. I think for what's happened to his type as he sees it, or what should have been his type, and he's quite relentless in following this up. And I thought it was interesting. In one of the letters, his friend who works at the British Museum saying to him, "Oh, you should probably, if you're going to pursue this against somebody's widow and family, it kind of doesn't look very good, really, and you can afford to let it go, really. And they're not that. It probably won't be as worth as much now as you think, because 20 years have gone by, and the present generation want their own style, really. But Walker kind of ignores it, really. He keeps going for some sort of retribution."
Well, he tried to recreate it, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yes, yeah, and got Edward Prince, who had cut the original ones, to have another go. And Prince was, I think Walker was maybe doing it about 1922, and Prince died a year later. I think his eyesight was
he was
going.
Not really able to do it at that point.
Yeah, but I found there was a letter after Walker died, when they were sort of going through sort of company offices from I think it was from his partner Wilfred Merton, about, I think, at least some drawings for the type. There were still, for Dove's version 2, there were some drawings, and I guess they must have cast some as well. I'm not sure. I haven't come across where they might be. If anybody knows out there, I'd be interested if they do still exist. But it certainly it seems like a second version did, it was quite advanced, but then Walker wasn't happy with it, so it never happened.
And then as you were feeding me parts of the book and the illustrations and so on, I noticed that one very dark illustration that I had to question was, is this what you want this to look like? To illustrate the passage about Coleman Sanderson throwing the type in the river.
Oh yeah, yes, it was a sort of imagining on my part, because I had a picture of Hammersmith Bridge, and so I made it darker, and then there was a bit from the Bruce Rogers, where he talked about when he first arrived in England in 1917, where he'd come over end of 1916, and he'd come over to work with Emery Walker, and he was quite excited at first, but he talked about the smell first of all. It's quite interesting how he said you could smell it was London, and then how the street lamps had like little covers over them. The light just shone down from the bottom because of air raids. So I tried to sort of recreate that, and there is just by chance there is a little figure standing on the bridge, a lone figure that sort of you think could be him, sort of thing. So, but it was just an imagining, really, of him sort of out in the blackout, really, sort of, dumping the time. Right.
I think you really bring Emery Walker to life. I mean, his personality and through the correspondence. I mean, the range of influential and creative people that he was in touch with
Sure.
throughout his life, and then hearing his voice through his letters really does bring him to life.
I hope so. I think he's sort of, maybe as a reader you have to interpret it a little bit. I think you perhaps have to put some work in maybe to form your own opinion of what kind of person he is. I think he's quite closed in some ways. I did a biography of Frederick Ward a few years ago, and he was an amazing letterwriter. It was very expressive. Everything Ward thought about anybody, he would put down the letters and sort of fire off these sort of broadsides about all kinds of stuff. And you don't get that with Walker. You would have done with Coleman Sanderson. I mean, the Coleman Sanderson diaries are interesting enough anyway, but they took out every reference to Walker that was in it, and you do wonder quite what that would have been. But Walker's he's more controlled in that way. In fact, when I was doing the research at Harry Ransom Centre, the first thing it cited me, they had a number of Walker's diaries. I thought, wow, if they're even, half as good as Coleman Sanderson, this is going to be worth the trip. And first day there, I ordered them all up, and they're just they're just notes of appointments. There's very, very occasional personal reference, but they're really, really rare. And he wasn't a diarist at all. So I had, luckily, I had the letters as well to move on to. But yes, I think I felt. I mean, Walker is somebody. In a way, his reputation is quite reflected through other people's work as well. And so I thought, take the approach of no one's an island. We are all really the sum of not just ourselves and what we do, but the people we know too. Our family.
He didn't have the same kind of ambition that others around him that he was dealing with had. I mean, he was perfectly happy he seemed perfectly happy to be in the background and making things happen, but not being the person who was claiming credit for
No, that's right. Well, I think maybe he does quite well at getting the recognition as well. I think it's a little bit like he's later collaborator T. Lawrence Arabia.
So that was
it said he backed into the limelight. Lawrence had this strange relationship with fame, and he on one hand he was trying to escape from it, but he sort of quite liked it as well. And Walker seems to be, without putting himself forward, he seems to get recognition as well. And I guess you say, well, he ended up with a knighthood, so he did. It was quite. Yeah, I was. It's interesting. I thought it was interesting to work out that the prime minister who gave him the knighthood was Ramsay MacDonald, who was an old friend from his socialist days. So it was maybe a bit of a friend's handout, but really, look, the British honour system still works like that anyway. So there's nothing strange about that. But I sort of wonder if Morris had been alive, whether Walker would have taken it, because the Morrises were very down on sort of getting any sort of gongs from the establishment. And maybe Walker always just thought, I don't know, if I'd offered had one, I'd take it. Who knows, right?
What do you think about his socialist period, or his socialism, or his politics?
It's an interesting question, because I didn't find, at least in the correspondence I read, there wasn't much direct comments by him about socialism, apart from one to Bernard Shaw, where he very much, you could probably say quite typically, he sort of downplayed himself just as this sort of not very efficient toiler. in the background, and that he just followed Bernard Shaw's advice: just whatever you do, just do it to the best of your ability if you want to honour whatever institution, if you like, you're serving. So he was quite restrained in that, but he stuck in there for a long time. He was, always seems to be the secretary, compiling the minutes of meetings and sending out letters, sort of drumming up subscriptions, and people seem to contact him, I think, as a direct point of contact. I think it's interesting. He probably came to socialism. And Morris is, he was a man of means. So whereas Walker had to go out where he was little more than a child and start working, and probably spent a lot of time doing jobs he didn't want to do, and probably had the spectre of poverty in front of him, at least for quite a while. So he probably experienced more directly of the reasons for the movement. So I'm convinced it was genuine. I don't think he was. I think we'd too hard worked for there to be just any sort of playing at it, really. So, but I think his sort of direct comments on it, I didn't find that many. It was interesting, even before the First World War, somebody who was sort of popular novelist at the time, since forgotten, but there was a letter from him to Walker saying, I'm trying to start up a world order of socialism, and would you like to come to a dinner of like-minded people? And just that was in 1914, so the timing was terrible. But it's interesting. Walker was still seen as a figure really on the left, and even in that period.
Yeah. You designed the logo for the Emery Walker house, is that right?
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yes.
Was it doing that work what got you started thinking about doing a book about Walker?
Yes, the process that it sort of started. I'd gone to visit the house, and I did some notes for the guides just about Walker's significance and sort of where he, in a way, him sort of arriving on the scene just when sort of a lot of the reprographic processes and new ones are coming in, and his ability to understand those and help people to get the best out of them. And so that's where I sort of started a bit of connection with the house and the trust. And then the previous chairman of the trust, called John Cherry, he then had an idea, because the house, they'd got a grant from the National Lottery, and so they were going to close, do some structural refurbishments, and then reopen. And he said, in the meantime, we could possibly do an exhibition of some of the objects at St. Bride. And I'd been working on the St. Bride Journal Ultra Bowl at the time, so he sort of saw me as a bit of a connection. So I spoke to St. Bride's, and it was discussed about it going ahead, the exhibition, but then St. Bride's hit a bit of a crisis. This was 2015, the library was closed for a while, so it sort of never happened, but the sort of connection with Emery Walker Trust had been sort of made. So yes, I'd been back to the house a few times, sort of taking photos and thinking of things that might work in the exhibition. Mm-hmm. And then they said do the logo. So it was really then sort of going around the house quite a bit that made me think, I can see all his things, but I'm not sure I get a great impression still of who this man was. Obviously he's a name that comes up if you're researching other things. Walker's name comes up all the time in connection with them. So that's what set me off. And then I thought, a way in might be through correspondence, and then found out that a big slice of it had been sold to Harry Ransomson. So this was in the 70s and 80s.
I did want to mention that, and you had touched on it, I think, his project, his last big project, the Odyssey of Homer.
Yes.
Which was a collaboration with
Lawrence.
Bruce Rogers.
Yes, sure.
And who's the other fellow?
Oh, Lawrence. Lawrence did.
Lawrence was the translator, but there's another.
Oh, Wilfred Merton.
Wilfred Merton, yes.
Yeah, he's
those three were the publishers, and then and then Lawrence or Shaw, as he was then
Yes, yes,
himself,
yeah,
was the translator,
yeah,
and that's such a beautiful piece of work. But,
absolutely. Yes, I think when I go to talk at St. Bride's, I said if you said to me, regardless of their market value, if you said if you can have one book that Walker was involved with in any way, it would be the Odyssey. I think it's just absolutely beautiful still, sort of very, very just classically elegant.
it was just a wonderful late in life project for Walker.
Yes, yeah, it almost rounds off the career, I think, really, really nicely, because it's kind of, I mean, within months really of it coming out, he's dead, so it's a great sort of final act, really.
Yeah,
Very neatly done.
and that seems a good
For
point to stop. So
us to conclude as well, yes, yeah.
well, let's get together again, and
Okay.
we'll keep in touch.
That'd be great. Lovely talking to you,
So much.
Matthew.
Okay.
See you later. Bye-bye.